previous half. And this is our normal pattern on Saturdays, that we have an ongoing running theme. And our theme at the moment is called the Six Perfections. And it's 6 particular very important virtues connected with the altruistic path in Buddhism. I'll say more about that in a minute. So I live in a small Buddhist community. I come in here to the centre most days on the bike, and we were meditating together in this what do you call it, open plan ground floor area, which is quite inconvenient. So we thought, let's have a kuti, a meditation kuti. Now, the word kuti is the old Buddhist term for a hut in the forest where you go and meditate. And I think in the area of Bow in East London, it's not quite a hut in the forest, but what it is a garden shed in the garden. So we decided we'd order a garden shed and turn it into a meditation kuti where we could meditate. So we ordered it, and it came down from a firm in Lancashire. So it was on one of these small flatbed trucks, just the walls and the roof and the floor ready to be assembled in the garden. So very nice guy. He turned up, he found his way there. He'd driven it all the way down, from the firm who made it, and nice guy chatting to them, unloading and all that kind of thing. And so then he drove off. But in leaving the little estate that we live on, another car came in on the little road off the main road, and he couldn't get out. He was trapped in by this other car coming in because it's such a narrow road. So I went over and explained, he's got to get out because you can't just reverse here. I can help you reverse if you like. And the driver of that car said, no way, no, I'm coming onto this estate. He can get out of the way, can't he? And so it was a little bit of an impasse. So the flatbed truck driver, he was also quite stubborn as well, actually. He said, I'm driving on this road. You've stopped on a double yellow line illegally. And there they were confronting each other. And I'm afraid I just tiptoed away. I thought, what can I do? Now, when I went back later, they had both gone. So somehow they sorted this out. But this is just so standard, isn't it? And I don't mean other people, especially on the road. I don't drive very much, but I do cycle. And there's so many times when I'm probably really annoying to other people and other people are really annoying to me. And in that case, the car driver's frustration is understandable. She's just driving her car to a usual parking space, and the small lorry is there in the way, and she's a bit fed up by this. But also his frustration is also understandable. He has to get up at 5 in the morning to drive all the way down from Lancashire. He's got another delivery to make. Then he's got to drive all the way home again. He doesn't want to be hanging around waiting for people. So what would you do? What would you do if you were the truck driver? What would you do if you were the car driver? Now, I guess if you weren't feeling tired and irritable and so on, you might be sympathetic to the other driver, whichever one you were, and you try to give way. And in Buddhism, this is known as giving up the victory. It's quite a nice phrase, giving up the victory, where you just decide, I'm prepared to be the loser in this case, in a confrontation. And in fact, ultimately, more than that, trying to give up the whole notion of victory and defeat. So could you do that? Or is that rather an unwise thing to do? Wouldn't you just be treated as a doormat if people learned that you didn't hold your ground, that you didn't say, look, hang on a minute, this is my right. Here, I've got to look after this. So this is our topic today. It's the third of the great Buddhist perfections. And the term is ksanti. The 6 perfections are the path of the Bodhisattva. And it's a path that sees the cultivation of the mind towards enlightenment as being something that you're doing for everybody's sake, your own sake, but also for everybody else's sake as well. And so because of that, it naturally starts with giving. Maybe I'll write these down so we can see where we've got to. So they call the perfections. So at the beginning of the year, we have the first one, giving. And this is a gesture, if you like. It takes you outside your narrow self-clinging. So it's the beginning of the Bodhisattva path. And the second perfection is leading an upright life. And we had a talk on that one last month. And then the third is this one we're doing today. And that is called ksanti. Sometimes said to be the most beautiful word in Buddhism, maybe partly because of the meaning of it, ksanti. And it's very difficult to translate, but usually people just call it patience, tolerance or forbearance or receptivity. But what it really means is this, and I think this is quite important. What it really means is staying in a good mental state in the face of all the trials and tribulations of our life. Staying in a good mental state in the face of all the trials and tribulations of our life. Staying in a good state. So do remember this, because in a way this is quite important. And you can imagine, if you can do that, you're laughing, literally. It means that you're confronted with another stubborn driver and you don't lose your temper. It doesn't necessarily mean that you give way, but it means that you stay in a good state of mind. You're okay with it. Very, very difficult to achieve this, really difficult practice. So I'm going to talk about this a bit as to how you do this, some of the suggestions. So it's not patience in the sense of hanging around in a long suffering manner, waiting for something to happen. But it's staying in a positive state of mind, despite all the stuff, all the crap that the world throws at you. So to see how we do this, the first thing maybe to do is to look at what are the trials and tribulations, what are the adversities that we have to face? What are the frustrations, the kind of frustrations that induce road rage when you're on the road? Well, there are a lot of them. You need to practice this forbearance in the face of a lot of things, unfortunately. For example, there are our own sufferings, our own illnesses, our own mortality, our own feelings of inadequacy, or feelings that we're not making much progress with what we're trying to achieve in our life. Our own mistakes, did that again, our own weaknesses and so on. But if that wasn't enough, we didn't have to cope with all that stuff of our own, then the rest of the world chucks things at us as well. Our environment, nature throws things at us. Our surroundings, bad weather, barking dogs, unpleasant food, and things. Why are things so infuriating? Especially technical things. Is it especially technical things? I think the more complicated it is, the more infuriating it is in a way, because you can't immediately see what you can do about it. At least if you're sweeping the floor and the broom breaks in half, you might be annoyed for a while, but it's quite clear you just need a new broom handle, But if your computer refuses to connect to the internet, you look at it and, come on, you did it yesterday, you were fine yesterday. And the phones and the bike with a funny clicking noise coming from the wheels and the central heating that doesn't work. I hope you do recognise this kind of thing, or is it just me? I think it is life, isn't it? God, things it throws at you. Have you seen that clip from 40 Towers where John Cleese, his car won't start, and he goes off out of shot, uproots a small sapling, and starts beating the car with this sapling and swearing at it and cursing it. And although that's maybe a bit extreme, I can relate to that sometimes, especially under your breath. So there's ourselves, there's our surroundings, the things we try to use. But there is one worse trial than all of these. One thing that is more difficult, the most difficult challenge to ksanti. So what would you say is the most difficult challenge to ksanti?
Other people.
Other people. Other people, yeah. Would you agree? Other people, why are they so difficult? People are terrible, aren't they? You know. So we'll come back to that. But first of all, let's go back and looking at oneself and things. So remember, ksanti is the virtue, the skill that means you can stay in a good state of mind even when things are going wrong. So how do you do that? How do you remain okay if you, for example, fall ill? Probably, I wouldn't be surprised if most of us here have had COVID at least once. I had it a few weeks ago. So if you get ill and you're worried about it, and you're in pain, or your mind is fuzzy, or you can't do what you want to do, and it's all very inconvenient and so on, how do you do that? How do you even remain okay when you contemplate some of the biggest things like their own mortality? We're going to die. We are going to die. You can't avoid that. In Buddhism, it's said that death is the one thing that is certain, but we do not know when, and we don't know how it's going to happen, but we know it is going to happen sooner or later. But also, how do you remain okay when you're assailed by a storm of thoughts, maybe in meditation or anxiety and other circumstances? What do you do then? And the Buddha liked to, the founder of Buddhism, the Buddha liked to visit his disciples when they were meditating. And if they were facing a lot of physical pain in their meditation or mental distress and frustration, he would notice it. So, for example, this is a bit of an extreme case, but one of his disciples actually had been a murderer, and he converted to the path of total non-violence and became well known for his kindness and non-violence. But the people in the area where he committed the murders heard about him, sent out a vigilante squad, and they go off and they beat him up, throw stones at him, you know, he's bruised, he's battered, you know, and he's determined not to retaliate in any way. And after this has all happened, the Buddha comes to see him and says, yeah, okay, you know, you led a violent life, that violence is still around you, you will have to put up with this. And he just said, bear it, monk, bear it, monk. And this comes quite often in the accounts of the Buddha's interactions with his disciples. He would say, bear it, monk, bear it, nun. Do you think that was maybe a bit unsympathetic? Maybe you could have, anyway, but that's what he said, you're going to have to put up with stuff. And in 8th century India, there was a great Buddhist philosopher and poet who was Shantideva. And somewhere, there are a couple of books over there. Where I put them?
They're there. Yellow ones.
Nope. Oh, well, I was going to wave, it doesn't really matter because I've got the quotes on my sheet here, but I was going to wave the book at you. It's called A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And it's a brilliant book that does go through the perfections and many other features of the Bodhisattva's way of life as well. And his admonition when things go wrong is, and this is to himself, he's saying this to himself, mind, be strong, mind, be strong. So you might want to learn that thing. If you're really facing a difficulty, you can say to yourself, mind, be strong. And in his book, the longest chapter of all is on ksanti. He's got so much to say about it. He says, there's nothing that remains difficult if it's practiced. So, through practice with minor discomforts, even major discomforts become bearable. The irritation of bugs, gnats, mosquitoes, hunger, thirst, and suffering such as an enormous itch is the example he gives. An enormous itch. Why not just see them as insignificant? Cold, heat, rain, and wind, journeying, going on journey, traveling is one of the most trying things to do, isn't it? Journeying, sickness, even imprisonment and beatings. One shouldn't be too squeamish about them, he says. Otherwise, the distress just becomes worse. So we just go over and over them in our minds, don't we? And what the Buddha said was that what your mind dwells upon always becomes stronger. So if you can, it's a difficult one, isn't it? It's not you want to pretend they're not there. You're mindful of them. You're mindful of the experience as an experience. But it's those circling thoughts, those brooding thoughts of, why is EasyJet late yet again? Why is the flight delayed and so on? And maybe these things are not really insignificant. What does he mean by saying they're insignificant? I think he means that in a sense, they don't have any special significance. They're just normal. It's what you expect in human life. And it's very easy to feel that we sort of have a right not to catch COVID, for example, and not to get ill. And it's wrong. It shouldn't happen that way. Or we have a right for it not to be pouring with rain when we are late for the tube or something like that. We have a right for the laptop not to forget how to connect to the internet. But we live in a world that is not set up for us. It's not designed to be suitable for us and do everything nice for us. It's not a world that where there's any guarantee that things will not go wrong. In fact, they will go wrong. Well, this isn't too pessimistic and depressing to say this, but I think it's good to face up to it. So, how do you protect yourself from this, from things going wrong? Now, you could try and take the defensive posture, just sort of hide yourself away and try and have as little as, no traveling, okay, no computer, nothing, I'll just hide away. And in a way, that's what we did, I guess, during the lockdown, wasn't it? That we had to sort of shrink like a tortoise, shrink into our shells for a while when the pandemic was at its height. But sooner or later, you have to emerge. You have to act, I think. And acting means facing change, facing difference. And if there's change, there will be some discomfort. And if we shy away from discomfort, we shy away from change. We avoid making things better because we are trying to keep everything, under control. And you can try and do that, and it may last for a while, but in the end, I think you have to sort of let go of that. And I think you can learn to remain positive, even with illnesses, even with the process of getting older and less of a... Do you remember how shiny you were when you were young? Some of you maybe are still young, but it goes, doesn't it? But being patient with that. Even being patient with our meditation not going as well as we'd like. Okay, so that's something on ourselves and things and our surroundings. But let's get on to this issue. The big one, other people. Other people have got so many faults. They've got so many failings. They offend us. They hurt us. They let us down. And so we get frustrated. So what is this frustration like? If you think about it, when you get frustrated with other people, what's it like? And it seems to me there's quite a range of frustrations that you can have. First of all, there's mild irritation, there's annoyance. But then there's getting really angry, even getting furious. And then I think it's maybe a slippery slope into absolute hatred, even violence, at least violence with the tongue, with speech. And what Shantideva says, you remember the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, what Shantideva says is there is no peace with anger. There's no pleasure. There's no joy. There's no sleep, there's no fortitude when the thorn of hatred dwells in the heart. And he says, nothing can make an angry person happy. Maybe you disagree with this, maybe sometimes you feel, yes, I'm really angry, I'm really enjoying it. But in a way, you can only enjoy it by standing back a bit from it and laughing about it, I think. And it's a very strong teaching, this one. But you might say, well, sometimes surely it is justified. I've got good reason for being angry. If I'm not angry, I'm going to be a doormat. And what terrible things would happen if you just suppressed your anger, if you kept that boiling volcano, capped off, it would explode. But Shantideva says no. When you're angry, you cannot be happy. So he says, even if I fall into extreme adversity, I shall not disrupt my happiness. And I think this is really difficult maybe to accept, that when things are going badly, that you can be happy. Because I think we tend to feel that happiness means things going well. And so we try to set up our life so that things are going as well as possible. We've got the right people that we're with, and the right job, and the right house, and the right possessions, and all that sort of thing, and the right salary, you know. But what Shantideva said, no, that's not to do, happiness is not that. Happiness is the free flow of human energy. And you can be happy even when things are going wrong, even when things are not ideal. I'm convinced of this. I mean, you think about it, I'm not trying to say, maybe you disagree with this, but I am convinced that it's true. It's possible to be happy. So I shall not disrupt my happiness, is what Shantideva says, by getting angry. And anger has a fuel. It has a source. And the source, the fuel of anger, is the discontent that arises because something happens that you don't want to happen, or something prevents you from getting what you want. And that's the fuel of anger. And this fuel is always available, especially if other people are around. It seems to me it's always available. It's as if all of us were sprinkling a fine mist of petrol around ourselves as we go around. And our flashes of anger are sparks, and those are sparks that can set the petrol off, set it alight. Now, maybe this seems like an exaggeration, but you know, even thinking of the war in Ukraine, what is the original source of that? What was going on there? And I'm sure there are many subtle political and historical conditions that gave rise to that war, but at least in part, the leaders of one nation got more and more frustrated with not getting what they wanted from the neighboring nation. And they threw their sparks of fury into the mist of petrol, and it went up. And maybe we think we're immune from that kind of thing, but as I say, it's a slippery slope. It can go down there. In fact, that text, the Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara, the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, is one of the Dalai Lama's favourite books. And his favourite quote from it is this: if there is a remedy or solution, what is the use of frustration? If there's no remedy and no solution, what is the use of frustration? And you'll find him quoting this over and over again. If there is a remedy, what's the use of frustration? If there's no remedy, what's the use of frustration? I mean, it's all about saying that, isn't it? Of course, we get frustrated. We don't say, I'm going to get frustrated. We just do. So this is why it's a process. It's a practice of working on this. It's a skill. So Shanti is the opposite of anger. It's the antidote to anger. It's the ability to walk serenely through this inflammable world without casting sparks all around us. And it's a long and gradual training to do this. It probably won't happen overnight. And habitually, what happens is we receive a hurt, or we receive a disappointment, and we react to that. The practice of Shanti is an application of mindfulness. You apply mindfulness to the space of awareness where the pain or the disappointment is there, where it first arises, where you are looking at the computer screen and it will not respond. Mindfulness. You go into that pain, you go into that disappointment as a real feeling. And you learn to sit with it. You learn to experience it fully without being compelled to hurtle through into the stage of anger, which is a stage which you feed through thinking. So we get lots and lots of thoughts going around. Who was it did this? Why did this happen? It's Bill Gates, all that kind of thing. And meditation is a chance to open up that space. It means that irritations and desires can arise comparatively quietly in the mind while you're meditating, and then you can notice them, and you can turn towards them, and you can face them squarely with courage, and you've got enough time to let them subside and turn into something else. And you then have time as well to realize that thoughts of frustration, thoughts of annoyance are never pleasant. they're not desirable. And what is genuinely enjoyable is to find ways of appreciating other people, seeking out their good qualities, the fine things they do, rejoicing in those things. And that might be a bit difficult at first when they're annoying you, but if you can do that, okay, I'm annoyed by this person, now let me just stand back a bit, see them as a whole. They're not just what they just said or what they just did, they're bigger than that. And there are some really wonderful things there. And that's pleasurable. But I don't think that's quite enough, because in a way, frustration is a wonderful thing. It's an upsurge of energy. It's a feeling that, well, there are obstacles, and some obstacles do need to be dealt with. They do need to be overcome. And anger is a rising up, a thrusting forward that takes you through, that makes you break through. So anger contains energy, and we need energy. And somehow we need to turn the anger away from people, that destructive, hateful anger, into something else. Away from people, including away from frustration with ourselves as well. Retaliation against people, according to Buddhism, retaliation is a complete no-no. You do not do it. It's a totally non-violent religion. But overcoming obstacles is not just okay, it is necessary if we're going to make any difference, if you're going to make the world a better place. So the space of Ksanti allows annoyance not just to subside, but also to turn into perfection number 4. And perfection number 4 is virya, which means energy or vigor. And that's what we're going to look at next month. So don't forget, this is only one of the perfections. And in a way, they are balancing perfections, Ksanti and virya, patience and energy. So for Shantideva, the cultivation of Ksanti is a fantastic and an impressive achievement, taking you well down the Bodhisattva path to enlightenment. And believe it or not, and I believe him, when you read it, it's quite convincing, he actually relishes having annoying people around. He says, isn't it great having annoying people around? As without them, how would you perfect your Ksanti? You need them, because the Ksanti's lurking there inside. It needs something to bring it out so that you can deal with it and work with it. So what he says is, this is another quote, since my adversary assists me in my Bodhisattva way of life, I should long for him, like a treasure discovered in my own house, acquired without any effort. So this is a hard one, isn't it? But see if you can do that. And this is apparently what the Dalai Lama has as his attitude to the Chinese. In interviews with journalists, he said more than once, when asked about Mao Zedong, he said, I can't do the Dalai Lama voice, you can imagine, he is my greatest friend. He is my greatest friend because he teaches me love and patience. So we may have ordinary forbearance, which is sort of a steely determination to keep our anger and our frustration down, to remain civilized, to remain reasonably polite. And I'm sure there's a lot of virtue in that. It's great if you can do that, but it does have its dangers, as I'm sure you know. But I've been talking about Ksanti in a more Buddhist sense, as remaining in a good state of mind, even in the face of severe provocation. And Shantideva wrote another book, as well as the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, the Shiksa Samachaya, the Compendium of Training. And in this, he says there are 3 kinds of metta, 3 kinds of love. And I think this applies to Ksanti as well. And first of all, the Ksanti for other selves. And this is learning to be more tolerant of other people, more patient, as we realize that the fact they're different from us is not a deliberate provocation, and deep down we have so much in common with them. So that is the first level of patience. The second level is rising above the sense of a self and other selves and realizing that we are all a complex web and flow of conditions. And this, in a way, is the basic Buddhist philosophy, just to see everything as being a flow of causes and conditions and results and so on, rather than being fixed, solid entities. And there are always hidden sources and drivers of what people say and do, which take them into this situation that we're facing now, that we are finding so annoying. And if you only knew how they got here and what happened to them, the conditioning factors, forgiveness would become much, much more easy. It's not wickedness or vindictiveness, and there's nothing substantial there to get angry with anyway. All evil deeds arise from the power of conditioning factors. Nothing arises independently. And this is what Shantideva says. And this kind of understanding is the great antidote to anger, to seeing things in terms of the processes that led to them. Shantideva says, seeing a friend or enemy committing a wrong deed, one should reflect, such are his conditions, and be at ease. In our world of seeing a separate selfhood, the logical thing is to defend or to attack, because we've got something to defend and something to gain. But in the world of interconnected humanity, which is actually the real world, the intelligent way is to respond to hurt and upset with patience, with forgiveness. That's the second level. So the first level was patience with selves. The second level is patience that sees interconnectedness and flow and flux and conditionedness. And the third level is very mysterious. It's not patience with substantial others, as we see them acting in opposition to our own interests. It's not even patience with them as a flow of conditions, but it's patience with them as complete, mysterious openness, shunyata, openness. And in one translation, this is known as the patient endurance of the Uncreate, which sounds very mystical, doesn't it? Although it's a bit of a strange translation. Better, it's ksanti with the realization that nothing substantial ever comes into being or ceases. So there's this flow. It's the way the Buddha talks about it, he likens it to going to a magical show. So imagine you go to a Derren Brown performance and you're convinced that you saw him do something or you saw something there, but it was a trick. And in the same way, according to Buddhism, in a way, everything is a trick. Not that there's any Derren Brown pulling the strings above there. The trick is produced by our own minds. Because our minds have come through a relatively narrow valley of conditioning, including all our evolutionary past, we give things a certain significance. We label things in particular ways because they're useful to us. This is a chair because I need something to sit on. I call it a chair. But the boundaries that we put around things, the labels that we use, are just provisional. And they're not absolute, but it's so easy to think that they're absolute. And so when we meet a person, we think they're a horrible person. But they're not. It's not like that. And in an ultimate sense, there's no person at all, in a way. There is just this flow of conditions. So you realize that everything is appearances. And all sorts of appearances appear to arise and go away again, but just don't take them too seriously. And strangely, seeing this deeply apparently gives rise to true and ultimate compassion, where we can apply all energy to the relief of suffering, without distinguishing between our own suffering or that of others. It's just suffering. Suffering is a signal something needs doing here. Another Buddhist teacher, Atisha, who lived not long after Shantideva's time in India, he says, compassion arises in the essence of emptiness and compassion, and realizing it, your mind fills with pleasure. And your mind, when you see things in this way, he says, your mind is like butter slipping into hot barley soup and dissolving away. And then compassion arises for all those who don't have this realization. You realize no words can describe other people. There's just wonder. Everything is inconceivable. Everyone is inconceivable. If you look more deeply into the nature of beings, then naturally compassion becomes more profound. And in terms of your whole attitude to life, this third level of ksanti means harmonizing yourself with the way things really are. Patience with the openness of reality. Now, you probably can't see this very well, but if you look at the Tibetan tanka on the back wall, does anybody know who that is, the central figure there? You'll recognize them. That is Padmasambhava. So Padmasambhava was responsible for the establishment of Buddhism in Tibet, one of the greatest of all the Buddhist teachers. But surrounding him, there are 8 other figures, and who are they? They are also Padmasambhava. So Padmasambhava, according to the legends, was able to manifest in many ways, in many forms. And the one on the lower right, that one on the lower, not the bottom row, but the one surrounded with flames on the lower right, is the most wrathful form, the most terrifying form of Padmasambhava. And as I say, he's riding on a tiger, a wild tiger. He's almost dancing on its back. And in his right hand, he holds a thunderbolt. In his left hand, he holds the triangular demon dagger, the purba. And what the demon dagger is for is to pin down demons so that you can look at them squarely. So the demons of anger, the demons of craving and so on, what you do with the demon dagger in the ritual is you pin it down and you look at it. You need to really look at it. And his face is either very dark or dark red in colour with absolute fury. So in a way, he's a great example of anger and frustration. But what you may not realise when you look at Tibetan images, you'll often see these very frightening, demonic-looking figures, but they are not negative, because we're used to in Christianity, anything sort of with flames and tails and horns and things must be the devil, so you've got to, no. But in Tibet, they're positive figures. They're regarded as being forms of Padmasambhava, ways in which he responded as was needed. And this figure, as I say, is called Dorje Drollo. And that's a bit of a long introduction. But he represents the irresistible energy of constructive anger and frustration. Now, apparently, Dorje Drollo made 3 terrible oaths. 3 terrible oaths. So what would be the most terrible oath you could make? I will kill all demons and I will murder all anger and something like that. But no, that's not what they were. These are what they are, his 3 oaths. Number 1, whatever has to happen, let it happen. Number 2, whatever the situation is, it is fine. Number 3, I really don't need anything. So these are very advanced practices. You may not be able to take these oaths, but just reflect on them. What does that mean? Whatever has to happen, let it happen. Whatever the situation is, it's fine. I really don't need anything. You can see lots of dangers, of course, in taking that attitude, I'm sure. Would you just be passive, let things, injustice happen and so on? But in future weeks, we can discuss that kind of thing. So maybe, do you think I should have tried to point that out to the car driver? Just gone up to the window and you wonder whatever has to happen, just let it happen. Everything is fine, can't you see? That this truck, and the driver in the truck, they're just a flow of conditions. They're just like flower petals blowing in the wind, Ultimately, they're just openness. They're all just empty. Whatever the situation is, it is fine. So you can just give up the victory and reverse and let him through. I don't think it would have worked. Actually, I don't think it would have worked. But it did make me think, what about me? I didn't find a constructive solution to that problem, and maybe the other 2 did in the end. I don't know. Maybe they ended up best of friends. I just tiptoed away from the argument. I was avoiding the situation of being in the middle of conflict, and I think I do have that tendency. I don't like conflict. Rather than sort of dealing with it, I sort of tiptoe away from it in some way. And after all, I was the main condition that brought about this problem by ordering the shed. After all. So maybe I couldn't have diffused it, but at least I could have been present in reflection. At least I could have been there, feeling for both the parties in their frustration and distress. So I can learn about ksanti by watching other people, noticing what goes on with those drivers, and feeling maybe rather superior when they show their irritation and frustration. But really, it's my own mind that I need to work with. Can I stay in a good state of mind and be patient with the deficiencies of my own body? Can I laugh at myself? Can I be more equanimous when things get me down, or let me down, or break down, when the key gets stuck in the lock and I can't open it? And above all, instead of wishing that other people suited my own expectations all the time, can I just appreciate them and their richness and their weirdness and their mysterious openness? So that's all I want to say, really. We can explore some of these things over the next few weeks. If you want to remember one thing, staying in a good state in trials and tribulations. How do you do it? So come back next week and let us know what your secrets are for staying in a good state. Try it. When you have a trial, or when something goes wrong, is something going to go wrong over the next 7 days? Is that possible? If it does, then remember, now how do I stay in a good state of mind? Remember the mindfulness, remember that pause where you look at your body, where you look at your immediate experience of it without going through into the churning away of frustration. Unwelcome experiences don't have to hurtle through into the negative sorts of frustration.